Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're sort of putting on our instructor hats.
Yeah, definitely. We're diving into IT audit and assurance, specifically this idea of reasonable expectation.
That's it. We'll be focusing on General Standard 1004 from ISACA's IT Audit Framework, ITF, and its partner, General Guideline 2004.
Think of ITF as the rule book for IT auditors.
In these sections, they're like page 1, setting the foundation for any decent audit engagement.
Exactly. For you listening, it's like understanding the core requirements before the work even begins. Why this standard is so crucial for making sure audits are actually useful.
Okay, so let's jump into General Standard 1004 first. It really does set the scene.
It does. The main point, 1004.1, basically says IT auditors need to have a reasonable expectation they can actually finish the job properly.
Properly meaning according to the standards, laws, regulations, all that stuff.
Right. And crucially, that they can actually form a professional opinion or conclusion at the end.
So what's reasonable mean here? It sounds subjective.
Well, it is a judgment call, but a professional one. It's not like guaranteeing success. It's more about looking at the situation up front and deciding, yeah, based on what we know, we should be able to do this right.
So it's an initial assessment of feasibility, basically,
Mm-hmm.
making sure you can actually reach a conclusion.
Precisely. You can't just hope it works out. It's an active check.
Got it. And that, I guess, leads us straight into the General Guideline 2004 that gives the practical steps.
Exactly. Guideline 2004 gives the how-to for establishing that reasonable expectation. And one of the very first things it hits on, section 2004.3, is the scope.
The scope. Yeah, the guideline is super clear here. It says the scope must be documented without any ambiguity.
No room for interpretation. Crystal clear.
Makes total sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If you don't know exactly what you're supposed to be auditing, how can you possibly have an opinion on it?
It's like being asked to check a building's security, but not knowing if you're meant to check the basement or just the ground floor.
Good analogy. A fuzzy scope just creates uncertainty. Auditors wouldn't know if they missed something vital.
Right. And that just destroys the reliability of whatever they find. The guideline tells auditors what to do if the scope is fuzzy, though.
Yeah, 2004.3.3. They've got to tell IT, audit management, and the governance folks.
Let them know there's an issue.
And then the options are basically push to get the scope clarified, make it workable.
Or, if that fails, they might have to decline the engagement altogether.
Which is a pretty strong statement about protecting the integrity of the audit process right from the start.
It's a necessary control, really. No, what about when the scope starts clear, but, things get in the way?
You mean scope limitations. Guideline 2004.4 covers those.
Yeah. And it gives some really practical examples.
Like not being able to get the data you need, or key people just aren't available to talk.
Uh-huh. Or maybe the timeline is just way too tight. Or even management trying to restrict access or what areas get looked at.
Right. Those are definite limitations.
And interestingly, the guideline also mentions scope being a problem if it's too narrow or too broad.
Too broad. How's that a limitation? You'd think broader is better.
Well, if it's too broad for the resources you have, the audit might end up being spread too thin, superficial.
Okay. Lacking depth. So you still can't form a solid opinion. Makes sense.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot, comprehensive but actually doable.
What other kinds of limitations does it mention?
Let's see. Challenges if the organization is really spread out, decentralized, maybe not having auditors with the right specific skills.
Oh, yeah. Skill gaps could definitely be an issue.
Problems with where the audit function reports into the organization. Issues getting info from third-party suppliers, delays getting documents.
Wow, quite a list.
Even delays in fixing problems found in previous audits can be a limitation for the current one. It shows potential roadblocks.
So that reasonable expectation isn't just a one-time check at the start. You need to keep an eye on these things.
Absolutely. You have to constantly reassess. And these limitations, they can't just be ignored.
No, you have to deal with them. Which I guess brings us to management's role in all this.
Yeah.
Providing information.
Precisely. That's covered in 2004.5 and also loops back to Standard 1004.3. Auditors need that reasonable expectation that management will actually provide the info they need.
And not just any info, but the right stuff, relevant stuff, and on time.
It's a two-way street, isn't it? Auditors can't pull findings out of thin air. They need the raw material from management.
So if auditors think they might not get that cooperation, that timely info,
Then same procedure as with the scope issues, really. They need to raise the concern.
talk to management, talk to governance.
Yep. see if it can be resolved, maybe adjust the audit approach, or again, worst case, potentially decline the engagement.
It seems like declining is always the ultimate backstop if the conditions just aren't right for a proper audit.
It has to be to maintain credibility.
Okay, what if things change mid-audit? Like, the terms of engagement need to be adjusted after you've already started.
Yeah, Guideline 2004.6 tackles that. Changes in terms. The basic rule is don't just accept changes without a good reason. There needs to be proper justification.
Especially, I imagine, if the change means the audit will provide less assurance than originally planned.
Exactly. If the level of assurance is going down, the why becomes really critical. Why reduce the scope now? Why lessen the intensity? What changed?
It needs to be a solid rationale and documented, I assume.
Oh, absolutely. Any changes have to be formally documented, agreed upon by the auditors and IT audit management.
And transparent.
Yes. The guideline says these changes must be explicitly mentioned in the final audit report, so anyone reading it knows what happened.
No hidden adjustments. Good. Okay, there's one more section, 2004.7, on other considerations. Anything new there?
It mostly reinforces things we've touched on, like only taking on work you can do according to the standards,
Right.
making sure the thing you're auditing, the subject matter, can actually be assessed against some kind of criteria.
Checking it's measurable, basically.
Yeah. And reviewing the scope again to make sure it's clear to the people being audited, the auditees, and identifying and dealing with any restrictions. It's kind of a final check.
A sanity check on the fundamentals.
Got it.
And the guideline links this to COBIT objectives too, right? MEA 02304.
It does, briefly. It shows how this reasonable expectation idea fits into the bigger governance picture.
How so?
Well, think about it. MEA 02 is about managing internal controls. You need reliable audits for that.
Makes sense.
MEA 03 is managing compliance with external rules. Again, audits are key. And MEA 04 is about managing assurance itself, making sure assurance activities work. That starts with having a reasonable expectation you can even do the audit effectively.
So this standard isn't just some isolated rule for auditors. It actually underpins broader control and governance objectives.
Exactly. It's foundational.
Okay, so wrapping up our instructor session here on Standard 1004 and Guideline 2004,
Yes.
the big takeaway seems to be this. IT auditors have to make a professional judgment right at the start and ongoing that they can actually do the audit properly.
That's the core. And that judgment relies heavily on having a really clear scope,
Management playing its part by providing info
having a plan to tackle limitations.
and being transparent about any changes.
Pretty much sums it up. Understanding this helps everyone see why some audits are valuable and, well, why others might not be. If these conditions aren't met, it ensures a solid base.
It really puts the focus on the upfront thinking and judgment, doesn't it? Not just the testing part.
It absolutely does. Which leads to maybe a final thought for our listeners.
Go for it.
How might knowing about this reasonable expectation concept change how you look at audit reports? Not just IT audits, maybe any kind of assurance report.
You mean thinking about the conditions under which the audit was done?
Exactly. Thinking about the assumptions, the potential limitations, the scope clarity. That stuff that happens before the final opinion is written, it adds another layer to interpreting the results, you know?
That's a really interesting angle. Food for thought, definitely.
Hopefully useful.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into reasonable expectation in IT audits. We'll catch you next time.